very good afternoon to all of you, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us this afternoon. This afternoon, the JCI is presenting a public forum on parliamentary reforms in Malaysia. As all of you know, there's been a lot of criticisms against the Malaysian Parliament in recent times, from things such as the inability of Parliament to act as a check and balance on the executive wing of the government, to the fact that we really do not have a proper functioning Parliament as widely understood. For example, until today there's no proper committee system in Parliament. And parliamentarians in Malaysia actually do not have access to research services. So I'm very pleased this afternoon that we have three prominent speakers to speak to us about the sort of reforms that we need in Malaysia. Our first speaker is Datuk Zaid Ibrahim, a well-known politician in Malaysia. And Datuk Zaid has been a senator, an MP, and a minister in the federal government. Our second speaker is a young MP who is currently serving his second term as a YB, and he will offer us some perspective on what the Parliament will look like with more opposition members in the 13th Parliament. And of course, the last speaker is a young politician, somebody who aspires to be in Parliament. So he will offer another interesting perspective. So thank you again for coming, and can I invite Datuk Zaid to be our first speaker. Datuk?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Hansri Chairperson, distinguished guests from Sunway and students. Thank you for inviting me here. It's always nice to be talking to young students, and it's also a very interesting topic. Malaysian Parliament, reforms and barriers. Now, I've been away from politics for a while, so it's not correct to say that I'm a well-known politician. And I'm also not current as to the prevailing spending orders in Parliament. I can recall some of those positions. With that caveat, I can then give my view on this. But before we talk about reform, we must ask why. Why do you want reform? Why do you want reforms in Parliament? Why do you want reforms? Why do you want institutional reform? Why do you want the judiciary to change? Why do you want the civil service to change? You want those changes because you want good government. You want good leaders. You want good governance. That's why. Otherwise, what's the difference? This Parliament, that Parliament? All right. So the people of this country must first want to have good government and good leaders. If you do not, if you want it, but you just so lah, you don't really mind, not so good, like now, nothing will change. Nothing will change. So it can only happen if the people of this country want good government, good leaders. I mean, for example, everybody talks about 1 MDB today. But for so many years, we have tolerated. We're happy. Finance Minister, Prime Minister, same fellow. They're so happy. Whenever he comes in, he kisses his hand. But we know the seeds of destruction is when someone has so much power. And today we have this problem. Of course, there are other problems as well, but I just give you an example. If you want good government, good leaders, you cannot have that situation. Because the basis of democracy, of good government, is there's some checks and balances. There's some accountability. That when you do something, you have to explain why. So coming back to Parliament, it's the same principle. Parliament is supposed to be, in an ideal world, Parliament is supposed to check on the government of the day. That you, as people's representatives, having won the election, having promised the people the sky and the moon, You stand in Parliament because you want the leaders, the government, to explain and account. That is the basis of the good Parliament. You want accountability. You want the leaders to explain to you why. Why this policy? Why not this policy? Why do you spend so much on a private jet? Why not? But we don't have that culture in this country. We don't ask questions. Because we don't want good government. We want, but not enough. We don't want enough. That's why in Parliament, everybody, except for a few, well, maybe Tong is different, right? It's DAP. But generally, everybody's scared to ask. Everybody's scared. And that's why our Parliament hasn't changed very much from the days of old. I mean, if you look at our standing orders, if you look at the rules, if you look at the powers to punish for contempt, and this is the mark of a good Parliament. Parliament can commit you. If they ask you to come to Parliament and explain something, and if you don't, it's a contempt. And parliaments in Great Britain or in Australia, they can commit you, they can send you to jail, they can fine you. That's why, when you have a scandal in Britain, even the richest man in media, the media mogul, would come to answer questions of the committee. Because he cannot get away with it. He may be a very rich man. But he must come to Parliament. But in our Parliament today, if you summon Joe Low to come and explain one MDB, what do you think will happen? He will just ignore you. Because our 1952 law on punishment, I think the fine is about $1,000 or something. Nobody cares. You try and call the Attorney General to Parliament, the Select Committee, or the PAC, or you try and call the Petronas President to explain something, it never happened, right? Because people just ignore. Because our Parliament is powerless. But it's by design. It's by design. Because the government of the day do not want you to probe, to question. So that the people do not know the story. So it's hunky-dory, everything is fine. You see, in major parliament, good parliament, they have independence. The Australian Senate, for example, have their own appropriation committee. You can appropriate so much money for the use of the MPs and senators. We have to depend on the Prime Minister's office to give you one chair, one, I don't know. How are you going to do any research, any work? You have a library of some sort, but it's very dark. I don't like to go there. We are not interested. So, if you want reform, okay, you give that power to punish for contempt. Even MPs can be punished and should be punished. If ministers don't give the right answers or half correct, half wrong answers, if you are evasive about things, you commit contempt. If you mislead the House, you commit contempt. But today, nobody's scared of that. So you need power to punish. You also need select committees. Why do I buy this submarine? Why do I have to pay 500 million more? Why we have a special gadget inside the submarine? Somebody must know. Somebody must ask this question. In a major parliament, we have a select committee on defense. Across party lines, certain key sensitive information are still made available to some members of that committee, if not the public. You must give. You must have select committees. Select committees on administration, on finance. Every year we have this audit report from the Auditor General. So and so much money gone, so much money disappeared. No action. Nothing. Because we don't have a select committee. we don't have someone, a body in Parliament to punish. We don't have. We don't have select committees. I don't know what select committees they have now, Chief, but I'm not very current, as I said, but based on my time. Even if you have one, it's all for show sometimes. So we're not interested, really. So we cannot have reforms unless we have select committees across a broad range of important matters: administration, finance, intelligence, military. You know. In our country, of course, race, religious relations. We need somebody to supervise and monitor. We cannot let Jakim run wild. And the Prime Minister, of course, running wild somewhere else. So we must have someone in Parliament, a committee, to say, excuse me, you're flouting the law. You're not following this. We don't have such a committee. Again, I said, it's by design. So that we don't have a good government. We don't have to answer anything. So, you want good parliament, you have to have more select committees. You must be prepared to give them adequate funding. You must be prepared for them to be able to ask questions. The PAC, of course, it's a famous one is the PAC. But our PAC is like, boleh tahan lah. Once in a while make good statements, you know. But PAC is not for you to look good. PAC is for you to defend the integrity of the government. PAC is supposed to ask, but of course I don't think PAC has got the resources anyway. Even if today, Mr. whatever his name, Mr. Joe Lowe, to say, okay, these are all the books on 1MDB. I don't think our PAC is competent or have the resources at the time. So our parliament is a nice show, a nice symbol for democracy. It's good. You have a big parliament building. You have new facilities. But in terms of the true purpose of parliament, we are far away from that. Far, far away. Far, far away. And that's because Malaysians don't want it bad enough. They tolerate a lot of things, Malaysians. In any other country, we wouldn't have to. Look, we still have people today, in fact, just a couple of days ago, someone asked Dr. Mahathir, sir, do you think we can achieve this developed status country in 5 years? I mean, people are still asking that question. We are going this way, not that way. But that's how unreal we are. Last week, I was in a border town. You know, I'm from Kelantan, border Thailand. Never in my life, when you buy something, the shopkeeper will ask you in baht. You always want ringgit. Today, they said, Datuk, boleh bagi baht. Well, people still say they are on the road to, I don't know about US dollar kind of stuff. Today, our national airline is probably worth 2 cents. Where is that pride? When are people of this country going to be angry enough to say, enough? No. You have a national airline worth 2 cents, and we don't mind. So, I don't know how much time I have. I'm an ex-politician, so I don't know, James. How long do I have? 10 minutes more? Okay. 2 minutes? Yep. 2 minutes. Okay. So I don't want to sound too pessimistic. This is for the young girls here. If you want good parliament, you must insist that parliament itself, the people that you elect, berani. You understand? Must be berani. If you look at the guy who is a beta, because you have to fight for all this. Nobody is going to give you that. Nobody is going to give you accountability. Nobody is going to give the rakyat transparency. Nobody is going to give Nothing. Unless you and your representatives make that demand. And only then, perhaps, when Mr. Ivan becomes MP, maybe, things will change, because these are young generation. But you must ask for it, you must fund for it, and perhaps you will get the reforms that you hope for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Datuk. Can I invite YB Liew Tong?
Zaid, Ibrahim, Ivanpal, fellow Malaysians, a very good afternoon. Well, in most interesting time of our history, where both sides are split, you have the government looking for a new prime minister, and the opposition looking for a new leader. The most effective opposition leader of this country is ironically Dr. Mahathir. I was talking to Datuk Zaid earlier. I say it's all his fault, because either he stay in the government long enough or he stay in the opposition long enough, he'll be eligible for that position or that role at least. And I'm delighted that so many people are sitting here talking about parliamentary reform, or listening to us talking about parliamentary reform. It was a subject that no one was interested in just a while ago, but perhaps because of the pay rise and because of my absence in parliament. So they are more interested in parliamentary reform. We need some major rethinking in our society. The first, most important idea that I think we need is to recognize that from 2008 onwards, the Malaysian society is a 50-50 society. Like any other democracy, any other mature democracy, very often you are in a situation where no one dominates in terms of votes. So the 2008 election, the government won 51% of the vote, the opposition won 49% of the vote. And in the 2013 election, we all know that the government won famously 47% of the vote and the opposition 51%. Either way, I think that voting trend will be there, that both sides will have about half of the share, whichever way, and it will be 55, 45, 45, 55. I think that is the reality that we have to accept and the government has to understand. And in order to accommodate that new reality since 2008, there is a need for the government to see that we are now in new reality and we should accept that it is a 50-50 society where the parliament is supposed to be the venue, the institution to accommodate the diversity of views in our society. Now, if you go to the British Parliament is really small. Winston Churchill built it in such a way, rebuilt it after the war, in such a way that it is small, so that when there is a national crisis, when everyone turns up, some of them have to stand. And he wants to give the sense of crisis, but if you trace it back, the original idea of British Parliament is to accommodate different forces in the society and to recognize that instead of going to war, the distance between the government and the opposition is two sword and an arm's length. And people used to bring swords to Parliament. In order to bring conflict into Parliament and resolve it, to recognize that the society is not a 100% totalitarian society, but a society where you have to give and take. And the give and take should happen inside Parliament. And unfortunately, the Parliament is now a theatre. The Parliament is a theatre partly because, as pointed out by Datuk Zaid and James, that there is no system of committees. And I'll show what we have at the moment. What we have in the Parliament. We do not have a Parliament. We do not have a committee system. You go into Parliament. It works this way. It works in such a way that if you speak the loudest, you shout the loudest, you get reported. Because reported have limited time, and if Tina Batangan shouted loud enough, you hear him, and if someone people like me who are interested only in details and not interested in shouting, you get nowhere. So it's perverse incentive. It encourages you to shout because it's a theatre. But any parliament is a theatre. Even in the US Congress, in the British Parliament, it is a theatre. And you need theatre in a way, because you need to dramatize the national crisis, you need to dramatize the choices, but you also need a very important component. You need the select committees, you need the departmental committees, you need the ministerial committee to work out compromises. So I'm not saying that theatre is terrible. You need the theatre, but theatre cannot be the only thing that we have. We cannot have the chamber alone and nothing else. And unfortunately, our parliament basically have only the chamber. And if you follow parliamentary news, when you read, we are now at committee stage. Don't be fooled by the word committee stage. What it meant by committee stage means the guard of the house will lower the mace, and instead of calling the speaker, you call the speaker the chairman. You have the committee of the house. We're still seated in the same place and nothing else. So I think from a theatrical sideshow, we need a collegial environment of committees, and Parliament has to be a place where we work out compromises. Datuk Zaid mentioned about the beautiful parliamentary buildings. When the Parliament building was built in 1963, it was the tallest building in Kuala Lumpur. Okay, it was 17-story. I was told that the Federal Hotel is also 17-story, but Federal Hotel sits on the flat land, whereas Parliament sits on the hill. It was the tallest building in the whole city. Today, when Dr. Mahathir built Putrajaya, he has forgotten that there's something called Parliament. Putrajaya is named an administrative city, and in Mahathir's concept, Parliament is not part of administration. Which is wrong, huh? Which is wrong. Parliament is supposed to be the center stage for administration, but somehow Dr. Mahathir doesn't see it that way. And I think we have to move away from a presidential prime ministerial rule. If you look at the institutional arrangement, and I've argued it previously in some of my writing, that the Malaysian prime minister is more powerful than the United States president in terms of institutional strength. The Malaysian prime minister could ignore whether Mahathir or Abdullah or Najib. They could ignore their Congress altogether. They don't even need to care about the Congress, whereas the Congress of the United States can shut down government, and the US president has to accept it. So in terms of institutional strength, the Prime Minister of Malaysia is more powerful than the United States president. And that is something that we have to change. We need a robust parliamentary government with a strong cabinet, with a strong backbench, and with a strong opposition. Sorry. Why do we need all this? I think Datuk Zaid has said it very well. We need good leaders, we need good government. Parliament has three major functions. The first function is to elect a government. In the British-style Parliament, unlike the American-style Parliament, the British-style Parliament has its ultimate and primary function to elect a government. So you have to elect a government from among the MP. And after you elect the government, those who are not in government, who are in the backbench or in the opposition, they are supposed to hold the government to order, to hold the government accountable. So the first and primary function of our parliament is to elect a government and to scrutinize the government. And the secondary function is to represent the people, as to express the wishes of the people, and of course to make law. So when we consider this, it is important, if you want a strong cabinet, a strong backbench, a strong opposition, we have to consider the parliament as a whole, and we have to train all MPs for government. If you think of parliament as a place where you will see future minister, future government, and of course you'll see rotation of power, you have to ensure that the entire parliament is ready for government. And which is why we need the entire parliament to be involved in government. Before I go into my proposal, I'm told that I have only 20 minutes and I probably have spent half of them. I want to show you exactly what happened as far as institutional strength. Just one example. Out of the many examples, one example is this. The Prime Minister Department has a budget of 19 billion ringgit for 2015. The Parliament has a budget of 89 million ringgit. My maths is bad, so you can do your own calculation. And this is only Prime Minister Department. This is not inclusive of other ministries. The Prime Minister Department alone runs a budget of 19 billion and the Parliament takes 89 million ringgit. I will spend a bit of time talking about the committee system and before I give a short list of what I think should do, beyond the committees, what we should do. Currently, we have 5 committees in the standing order. The first committee is actually a committee to select other committees. So this is just it's called Committee of Selections. The party leaders sit there in order to make decisions for appointments to other committees. And also other office other office in the parliament. We have the Public Accounts Committee. I don't have to go into the details. We have a standing order committee to review the standing order. It rarely meets. It meets when the government wants to amend the rules, but rarely. Sometimes you don't meet in the entire 5-year term. There is a House Committee to deal with the administration of the House. Unfortunately, the House Committee rarely meets, and the Parliament building is supposed to undergo renovation now. If you have a chance to visit Parliament, you'll be really appalled by the quality of work of the temporary building. We used to have the most beautiful building, the tallest building in KL, but today they are on terrible temporary building, which I felt very bad as a member of Parliament. The House Committee do not meet. The House Committee do not discuss any renovation project. The House Committee has no right to. Basically, it is entirely bypassed. Who runs the Parliament? The administration of Parliament used to be under the Speaker and with what they call the Secretary of the Parliament as the main administrator. But because of internal fight, now the Secretary of Parliament is reduced to run the affairs in the chambers alone. The administration is now under Prime Minister Department, under a minister since 2004, and the current minister, someone from Police, called himself the governor, as if the Parliament is India under the British. The final committee is called Privilege Committee. When someone wants to be referred, if government wants to refer someone to disciplinary action, they will go through Committee of Privilege. Our proposal, this is based on our proposal. This is based on pre-2013 ministerial titles. We propose that. Well, first of all, we think that we have too many ministries. We probably need about 18 ministries will do. I mean, we have 24 ministries now. We have 10 ministers in the Prime Minister Department. I don't think we need that many ministers. Some of the ministers who are ministers now, we can put them as a committee chair. Make them strong committee chairmen in Parliament so that they can play a political role without burdening the cabinet. We think that we should have only about. Sorry. Can someone help me? Yeah. Okay.
Why don't you let me control?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We think that we can group our ministry into 7 categories, and you can see from some of the lists. National and international affairs, we can group the key ministry within that cluster. We can group the economic and finance ministries in the same committee. We can group security ministries together. We can group education and employment ministry together. Agriculture and regional development, infrastructure, resource management, environment, we can group them together. And finally, we can group community well-being together. I mean, this is not new. The Australian government has 18 ministries, and they have about 9 committees in Parliament. Each committee is supposed to take care of two ministries, and some ministries have 2 or 3 ministers, but you only have 1 ministry. And it's something that we can learn. Before I end, the next one. Before I end, I think some of these are some of the agenda that we can go into detail in future. We need a Senate reform. Without a Senate reform, parliamentary reform is not complete. We need a Senate that is elected. It can be elected in multiple forms. It can be elected by the state. It can be elected by through proportional representation. But the Senate has to be elected. We need a proper committee system. We need a system. This is what I proposed to the Speaker. I spoke to the Speaker. I thought that he wanted to bring it. He would actually bring it up, but after 2 years, it doesn't happen. In the Australian Parliament or in the British Parliament, there is something called a main committee room, or in the British Parliament, it's called Westminster Hall. In that system, your constituency matters and a lot of you can bring it to a separate room to discuss that, so that you don't take up the time of main chamber. You don't take up parliamentary time of the main chamber, yet you get your representative functions fulfilled. This is something that we can do immediately. We can do. I have figured out how to do it. I spoke to the Speaker, and nothing happened. There is a need to recognize the office of the opposition leader in a deeper way, in a more proper way. Currently, the opposition leader is given a small office with 1 clerk, and he's given a 3,000 ringgit stipend. But there is a need to recognize it as a minister or with ministerial rank. And I think there is a need to recognize the official opposition front bench. Once you recognize it, you pay the front bencher a salary, then you can say, okay, we need the opposition to form a shadow cabinet. Without providing all this, there's no material basis to it. We need to change the relationship between the Prime Minister Department and the Parliament. We need to reform the cabinet. There are other details that we can discuss in a future session. But my key point is that we have to recognize that we are in a new situation where we are in a 50-50 society. We need to find compromise. We need to reconcile. We need to build a new future, and that has to happen within Parliament and not outside Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ravi. Can I invite our final speaker?
Thank you very much, Professor James, Tan Sri Jeffrey Chia, Tan Sri Raymond, Professor James, Dr. Zaid, YB Liew Tong, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Just now, Professor James said I'm an aspiring parliamentarian. I don't know about that. But I am part of the government. I come from Gerakan, which is one of the 13 parties in Barisan Nasional. I was quite surprised that Professor James actually invited me to speak. One is that I've never been a parliamentarian, and the secondly is that my party has only 2 MPs. Well, we have suffered in the last 2 elections, but rest assured we are still here. We prevailed in a by-election on 31st of May last year in Teluk Intan, and my boss, who's also my party president, was subsequently appointed as minister, and I have the privilege of serving as his political secretary. Of the great officers of the Constitution, you have PM, Minister, Deputy Minister, Parliamentary Secretary, then you have the political secretary. But the good thing about being a political secretary is that we are the only ones that need not stand for elections to actually be appointed. So I believe that the 2 speakers before me have spoken eminently, and it's no surprise that I disagree with a lot of what they said. But I think there's just a few important clarifications that I should make as a member of the government. I think the first thing on the Parliament, that Dr. M did not care enough for Parliament to move it to Putrajaya. I think that's not a very fair comment to say about Dr. M. Though, as you guess, I would like to say a few things as well against Dr. M in view of the way things are going. But most importantly is that because the MPs themselves did not actually want to move to Putrajaya, I know that because in 2008, 2009, 2010, there were discussions on this issue. The second is the point of the Prime Minister's Department's budget. I am in the Prime Minister's Department. It's only fair that I defend my department. Yes, we have a fairly large budget. The reason being is because we have close to 50 agencies under the PM's department. So if you look at it proportionally, it does not stand as one of being 19 billion. So it's a bit unfair, I would say, to categorize, to juxtapose the two, and then to say that we do not care about Parliament. The third issue is that even India has a minister in charge of Parliament. His name is Liew. So having a minister in charge of Parliament is not an aberration of sorts. As for the size of the cabinet, we have 31 ministers. If I'm correct, 34. Yeah, 34 ministers. Now the reason being is because we are a diverse country, and also Barisan Nasional has 13 parties. Sorry, we had 14 until SCPP left in 2008. So sometimes we have to take into account political considerations as well in forming the cabinet. That is the reality of life. Politics is the science of government. So in view of that, I take the view that we do not need to wait for something to be broken to fix it. I think reform is an evolutionary process. Reform is not bad. Reform is good. We need reform. I try to reform myself every day, and I try to be better the best I can, because that is important. So in Parliament today, I think to take Parliament, the way it's been categorized as being a rubber stamp is completely unfair. If you just look at the debates recently on the Prevention of Terrorism Bill and the Sedition Amendments to Sedition Act, even a lot of Barisan Nasional backbenchers raised issues concerning these two acts, and a lot of the feedback was taken and included into the amendments. Secondly, I think the government, as of now, when it comes to bills of Parliament, they are circulated to the Cabinet. But before it goes to the Cabinet, there's syndications, not only with political parties, but also with NGOs. So in that sense, the process of lawmaking in this country is not something where the AG wakes up one day and says, hey, I want this law, and come, let's go and do it. Put it to the Cabinet, put it to Parliament, and then ride roughshod over all the MPs and pass the bill. So I think that process must be looked in the proper context as well. The third thing is that I agree with YB Liew Tong on the need for committees. That is something I absolutely agree with, and that's something my party has spoken up on for many, many years. And we believe that more committees are good. Accountability is important. So that is something that I think the process will take place. Maybe in the state assemblies of Kelantan, Penang and Selangor, they can start it there, and that will give a political impetus to us in Barisan Nasional to also continue with making those changes to Parliament. Now, our system is obviously the Westminster system. That is part of our vestiges of our colonial past. And I believe that I have been to the House of Commons in the UK to look at the debates. And I can tell you they are as rancorous as some of our sessions are in Parliament. But I think when you have MPs disagreeing with a certain decision, walking out, wearing clothes in a certain colour to make a point, I think that in itself is disrespecting the system of parliamentary democracy. Now, in any system of government, you have a majority, you have a minority. Now, we can talk about the electoral system, I have my views on that. We can talk about the popular vote, I have my views on that. But in the end of the day, this government is here to stay until 2018. We will have an election by 2018 when we are due, and then the people can so elect. If the people feel that we have not done a good job, or you do not like us, you're free to throw us out. We are thrown out of Penang, and we have accepted that with immense grace. And yes, it's painful, but it's true. I mean, we accept it. I accept it. You know, that is part and parcel of politics. That's part and parcel of governing. You win elections, you lose elections. You accept the outcome. But when the very passionate anger that comes about because one feels the electoral process was, in a certain way, was not reflective of one's views, then that somehow or other translates into Parliament and clouds the whole process, and that's why you have this great pugnacity between two sides, which is quite unfortunate. So I believe that is where we stand as of now. Parliament can only work, and I agree with YB Liew Tong on that all parties must work together. So the government expects the opposition to work with us on issues, and on some issues they have. I mean, constructive views have come across on a number of issues, some of it informally, some of it formally, and we appreciate that, and that shows that our democracy works. And I think that is important, and that's somehow left out in this great Punch and Judy kind of situation, to borrow the words of David Cameron. Now, how do we move forward? What are the reforms? I mean, I think we didn't go into details. YB Liew did on the issue of committee, which I joined issue with him on that. I agree. Secondly, I think it's good if the opposition can form a shadow cabinet. They've been government in waiting for, in a way, so they claim, for 6-7 years now. So I think a shadow cabinet is important so that if a minister on the government side has a certain issue to discuss, he can so choose to discuss it with the opposition MP. I think the formalization of the opposition is also something that is welcome if it happens. Engagement with non-governmental organizations, with pressure bodies, I think that is important as well. I myself, my party personally has engaged with the Bar Council and other legal bodies as well on acts of parliament that we've been asked to give our input to. This consultation will continue, I believe, and must continue because it is important that, as YB Liew said, this is a diverse country and Parliament is a reflection of the diversity. I fully agree with that. And the way in which we respect this diversity is that we consult and we get views. But I think the problem with consultation is that everyone expects us to take their views wholesale, and the minute we don't do that, say, oh, this is a bad government and this is a bad bill because the Bar Council wants things done their way. Then you have the more NGOs on the other side of the political divide, or if you take a right and left spectrum, those NGOs on the right say that no, it should be done this way. So what is engendered out of this process of consultation to me is a great compromise. And I think that is a word that is missing from the political lexicon of today, is compromise. And the problem is we seem to see everything as a zero-sum game, and I don't agree with that. I do not think politics is a zero-sum game. I do not think governance is a zero-sum game. We share power. We share power in a democracy between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And while our system may not be perfect, because I don't think there's something called the perfect system, in America you have people criticizing the way the American system is, and people say that, wow, America is the best system. I was reading about the Canadian Parliament, and reforms are being done in Canada that people again are saying, oh, it's anti-democratic, but the way I look at it is very democratic. So either I'm not very smart, or those people who are criticizing are not very cooperative when it comes to reforms. So in that sense, I think what we need is a more collegiate atmosphere, and I agree with the speakers before me who have said that, but that collegiate atmosphere can only come, the basis, or rather the foundation of that collegiate atmosphere, I believe, will be in accepting the results of elections, as we have done in places where we've lost. We lost 3 states, Kelantan, Penang and Selangor, and working with the administrations in those states. So, if at all we want reform, I agree with YB Zaid on only one point, I would say, is that we must be serious about it, but at the same time, all parties must work together, be it the government or the opposition, if reforms are to succeed. And I agree on another point that is raised, that yes, we are in government and we should take the lead, and I believe on a number of issues we have taken the lead on reforming. If you look at the PAC in this country, I think the PAC is being very robust on a number of issues. And the PAC chairman has been very vocal on a number of issues, and the PAC also has 3 members or 4 of the Pakatan Rakyat who are sitting in the PAC as well. And in fact, previously we had a select committee on electoral reform. That was in the last parliament session. You had ministers, you had component parties from both sides of the political divide, and you had NGOs coming to give their views. So we have done, and we have used the avenue of the select committee to get views from across the board. Well, and I believe that more select committees are needed, is important. Another thing that is missing from today, I think, is the concept of the white paper. I think that is again something that we can look at. And then after white paper, you actually have a green paper. Yeah, so this consultation will ensure that the process of lawmaking is collaborative. And I am sure we can do better, because we have to do better, and I think we owe it to the people to do better. But to sit back and say that, you know, all is rotten in Parliament, I think is also very unfair, and it also, in a way, ridiculing the mandate given by the people in the form it's been given. Thank you.
This offers us a very good insight into, you know, both sides of the debate. So we have a good about half an hour for question and answer. Can I open up the floor for? Sorry. All right. Okay.
Can I just reply on points mentioned? First of all, we don't need so many agencies in the Prime Minister Department. There are 50 agencies in the Prime Minister Department. Many of them are redundant. Many of them are duplication. I'll give you an example. SPAT, the Public Transport, Land Public Transport Commission. It should be placed under the Transport Ministry long time ago when it was first established. And this is one of the strangest countries in the world where the Transport Ministry doesn't take charge. It's not involved in public transport. So how come? The Human Rights Commission, and I have long argued this, the opposition has long argued this, that it should be placed under the Parliament. It should be part of the parliamentary structure and not under the Prime Minister Department. We have a Public Complaints Bureau within the Prime Minister Department. It could always be placed under the Parliament in the form of an ombudsman, which is quite common in many other countries. And it should be placed under the Parliament as an ombudsman. And there are many other suggestions. For instance, to make the Attorney General a minister, so that he is responsible to Parliament and he answers questions in Parliament. I think the Prime Minister Department, in many ways, are redundant. We need not only to change the Prime Minister, but we also need to change the way the Prime Minister Department is. Yes, there is, in India there is a minister in charge of Parliament, but in charge of government business in the Parliament. He is not in charge of the toilet paper in Parliament. He is not in charge of the what they call the library in the Parliament. He is not in charge of the parliamentary service. The parliamentary service is under the purview of the Speaker, and the parliamentary toilet paper is under the purview of the Speaker and not the minister in charge of what they call parliamentary affairs. But here, unfortunately, the administrations of the Parliament, including the toilet paper, is under the government of Parliament. I mean, Porta and all this, you know that we were given parachuted bill. I remember in 2004, immediately after the 2004 election, Datuk Nasri Aziz was invited to DAP parliamentary reform meeting, and I was still very junior at that time. In fact, I was still studying in Australia. I was here because of the election. And he came and he said, now that he was appointed as Minister in charge of Parliamentary Affairs, the first thing he wanted to ensure was not to have parachuted bill. What do we mean by parachuted bill? That means today I present you this bill, I expect this to be passed tomorrow or the next Monday. And this is what's going on. This is what has been going on, and it's very frustrating for MPs. Because you, as an MP, may have the time to read it, but you have no chance to actually bring it out, to sit down with people, to consult the people. While the government can claim that, oh, we have consulted widely, but the MPs are not consulted. Maybe MPs from the other side were consulted, but the opposition MP were not consulted at all. And the opposition MP has no chance to bring it out, to consult other people on their own. And it's important. The opposition MP has to be given the chance to consult their own expert. And of course, the best will be to consult together with members from the government in the form of select committee or departmental or ministerial committee. That would be the best case scenario. Those are issues that I think we need to understand. And one important point is that we adopted the Westminster system in 1957. Okay? But the Westminster Parliament is an evolving institution. It's an institution evolving on a daily basis. It's a very robust system. They have their problem. They have their when they increase salary, people scolded the MPs and the same thing. But we must understand that the British Parliament is also an evolving institution, and we must keep up with that. Not only to keep up with that, we should actually do better than the British Parliament, and not to say that we are one of the Westminster parliamentary system, and therefore Westminster Parliament people quarrel in the chapel, and we also quarrel in the chapel, so nothing. We are better than them. Not true. I'll give you an example. Before 1979, there was no departmental or ministerial committee in the British system. So when we adopted the British system, there was no such thing as departmental committee. But when Margaret Thatcher came in 1979, one of his ministers said that we must do this, we must put this in place, where each of the ministry is being monitored and being governed by one committee. And Margaret Thatcher said yes, and that happened since 1979, and they have improved it on a daily basis. Some of our MPs, I went with Jaslan to British Parliament. We spent 3 days looking at their PAC. We look at their ministerial committee. We talk to their people. I mean, we know that it can be done. We know that it can be done in the Malaysian Parliament, just that there was no political will to do it here. And finally, I want to say this. What I've been stressing is that we need institutional reform in order to accommodate new political reality. I'm not talking about the opposition cooperating with the government and others. The opposition can offer its cooperation, but the more important thing is to actually work out an institutional compromise in order to accommodate the voices, the supporters of the opposition, the voices from the opposition, and to create a core governing structure so that both sides can govern via the parliament and not to ignore it, not to bypass it. Thank you.
No.
Ivan, would you like to say something?
Well, I think in the spirit of democracy, I accept. I think widely used views, but it's no secret that I don't agree with them. But I think on the issue of institutional reform, it's important, and I agree that any society needs institutional reform, but the very basics is that, for example, in Parliament, the opposition can start forming its shadow cabinet. That's a first step towards institutional reforms. So, I mean, we can all speak in platitudes, but I think what's most important is that actions must follow. So, it is good to lecture the government, that's what oppositions do, but at the same time, a lot of these reforms could have been taken up in state assemblies under Pakatan Rakyat control, and that would naturally put the pressure on us. So I don't want to make this about BN versus Pakatan. I think these are two important points that I want to say and must be kept in perspective when we are being critical of the way things are being run currently. So when there's opportunity to do it better, or assuming you see the need for it to be better, then seize the opportunity. Kappa BN. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No. We'll move on to the Q&A session. Yes.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Few clarification required from the panel. Number one, I was very intrigued when YB Liew said the role of Parliament is to elect the government. And if I look at the way our governments are elected, the people vote in, the party with the most number of seats, 50% plus 1, has the right to form the government, where the accepted leader actually goes to the king and he becomes the prime minister, and he can appoint anyone as the minister. So far he always mixes up Dewan Rakyat and Dewan Negara members, appointed members, and I'm not sure, you need to please clarify whether in the constitution allows him to appoint all his cabinet members from the Senate. Is that allowed? And if that is the case, okay, the parliament doesn't elect the government, only the Prime Minister. And funny, the Prime Minister says he represents the voice of the people, but we are not the one who's electing the Prime Minister. Okay? Only people in Pekan, okay, responsible for that. Okay?
Can you quickly finish off the question?
Yeah,
please?
that's the question. Clarification. Now, number two, Mr. Ivan, backbenchers' view taken into consideration. But if that's the case, what is the whip? And what's the role of the whip? And if you can talk so much, but when it comes to voting, you still have to comply with the position taken by the party, then all the discussion is meaningless, especially if you look at what is Parliament, what's been happening in Parliament. They talk. When it comes time to decide, they don't have a voice. They have to toe the party line. Public Accounts Committee.
Can
Even
you
when
give your
they
question, please?
third question, because Mr. Ivan said, we have a Public Accounts Committee, but it has no bite. He has requested the presence of ministers to answer questions. The ministers don't turn up. When the officials turn up, they use OSA, even to PAC. Now, if your PAC doesn't have access to even important material, then how is PAC going to play its role? And one more thing, the State Assembly of Selangor has recognized the position of opposition leader, given very good remuneration or stipend, but the BN opposition leader refuses to take up the post. If it can be done in Selangor, why not the parliament does it to the opposition leader and give a proper office and recognition to the post of opposition leader?
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, how the government of the day is elected, in theory, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Zaid, who used to own one of the largest law firm in the country, so they're eminent authority on that. And YB Liew, in theory, yes, the government can actually have a cabinet full of senators. There's no bar to it. The constitution doesn't say you can't do it, but obviously no prime minister will do it. So I think that's a bit of a cheeky comment. How the government of the day is elected is quite simple. Who commands the majority in parliament in view of the king is invited to the palace, like how the same way it's done in Britain and in Australia and other countries that practice the Westminster system. Now, as far as accountability comes, I think a lot of us talk about accountability, but I think the one greatest accountability comes once every 5 years, and it's called the general election. Now, we do not have a proportional representation system, neither do we have a mixed member proportional representation system like Italy and Germany, so obviously we are governed by first past the post, and that is the way we have done it. Now, as for the role of the whip, yes, there is robust debate, but in the end of the day, I think if at all it is a matter of, the whip has a rule actually, he can come out with 1 line, 2 lines and 3 lines, as it is well known in parliamentary jargon. So when it comes out with 3 lines, obviously then you have to vote for the government. But then again, I think the views given by the backbenchers and others are always taken into account, at least to my knowledge, when it comes to government bills. Now, as for the PAC, I'm not quite sure which specific instance you're referring to, where a minister had come and he was not allowed to speak. But from what I know is that I myself actually presented before the PAC on this. I'm getting confused here. On the Select Committee on Reform, but obviously the PAC has the power to compel someone to come in. But again, I'm not quite sure which specific instance you're referring to. Now, as for the opposition leader in Selangor, I think maybe you can ask him that.
Please.
I mean, the PR state, for instance, Penang and Selangor has given allocation to opposition members. Although I think in the long run we should abolish constituency allocation because it's actually not the most effective way of using money. But the PR states in Penang and Selangor has given allocation to the opposition in our states. It's not reciprocal by the federal parliament. As pointed out, the Selangor opposition leader is given a car. The car was returned because the pressure was too strong and the office was not occupied. There's no opposition leader in Selangor now because Ian doesn't want to doesn't want this to be followed or to be requested by the opposition in Parliament. As far as shadow cabinet, I've said we should actually provide the salary and also the basic officers and researchers, and basic amenities for shadow cabinet to assist. That should happen. And for PAC, the unfortunate part of all committees in Parliament now is that they are assisted by, for instance, PAC is assisted by the Auditor General Office. It's okay because the British PAC is also assisted by the Audit's Office, but you also need your own committee staff, which is not available. There is no significant number of staff being devoted to committee. And for instance, all previous select committees, not many of them, we have a committee on electoral reform. We had a committee on what we call the CPC, Criminal Procedural Code and the Penal Code. We had a committee on unity, and this was over the last 10 years. We probably have about 4 or 5 select committees in the last 10 years. They were all chaired by ministers. And the reason given that why they were all chaired by ministers was because only minister has secretarial staff, whereas parliaments do not have secretarial staff to assist those committees. I think these are things that we have to reform, because otherwise, even if you have the committee, the committee have no intellectual resources to carry out its mandate. On the questions of British Parliament, or the way British Parliament form what they call government, I was basically saying that parliaments are formed in the governments are formed in the Parliament, and the upper house is also part of the government. The upper house is also part of the government, and it should be elected. If both houses are elected, I don't see any problem having ministers from the upper house, and rightly so, there should be ministers. The only reason why we complain about ministers from the upper house now is because it is a backdoor entry into Parliament without having to go through election. They should be elected, and they should be, rightly so, they should be in the cabinet.
Yeah, I think we just changed the government. I'm sorry, man. You can still join the opposition. No, I think that, like I said, I've been in politics for many years, and yeah, I've seen both sides. I think we are not serious about this. We're not serious. That's the problem. Even the opposition is not serious. I'm sorry to say. I mean, today you have PAS and DAP. I don't know whether they're talking or not. I don't know whether on a very core principle, on a very core basis of the country, we sit together, but we disagree. What I'm trying to say is that I think people must be more willing, and that includes political leaders, must be more willing to stand by some core principles by which we want this country to be. I mean, anybody, not anybody, but I think it's not that difficult to win to be a member of Parliament. You just rub shoulders with the right party leaders, you just, yeah. And you want something for this country. We haven't had the opportunity to shape this country in a certain fundamental formula. We don't have. One day we have Islamic State, the next day we are together on the same table. One day we have Malay affairs, the next day we are part of Bangsa national family. We're not serious. And that's my problem with this, because I think so long as we are very lackadaisical about this, we think it's okay, life goes on, things will be better. Like Mr. Ivan is very positive about the future. I'm not. I have seen Malaysia better days. I have. I don't remember in my younger days that people quarrel about this sort of thing. Okay, you pray, which restaurant you eat, what kind of food you have, what dress you wear. We fight over the smallest thing in this country, and we think that's not worrying. Now that's worrying. If we fight about big things, like whether it should be a socialist system vis-a-vis a more open, laissez-faire economy, we can fight about that. I don't mind. That's politics. No, we can talk about the public transport should be less. We should have more privatized toll road. Fine, if that's what the people want. But we cannot differ on basic issues of liberty of life, of the people's welfare. You cannot. And that's what I want to say, because I've been going around talking about this for a long time, but then it becomes a political forum. This is supposed to be an academic one. And I'm not very good academically, so.
Yes, please.
I would like to quote, you say that the government is here to stay until 2018, and whether we like it or not. And you can withdraw now if you really did not do a good job. And I think it's a very, very extremely irresponsible thing to say. Second, you say reform is not going to happen now. It's an ongoing process, and everybody should work together to achieve that. But tell us in a more practical sense, what are you doing as a government in the direction of reform? Instead of just coming onto stage and say, we can do better, we owe it to the people to do better.
I apologize if I have offended you, but rest assured I'm certain of one thing: you don't share my political views. But I don't think it's an irresponsible remark. That's a remark that reflects our system. We have elections once every 5 years. And that's how it is. If we want to have elections every day, then, well, it's going to be a bit tough. Now, the second point about reform, I think if you talk about specific reforms in a specific area, then maybe I can argue. So is there any specific area of reform that you're referring to? Or talking about reforms of parliament? Or reforms of, yeah?
Yeah, let's talk about the minister and the agencies, the redundant agency that we have right now.
That's Liew Tong's view. I think the PM's department is functioning fine. Okay, on a more serious note, I think on like issues of SPAD and others that were raised by Liew, there are specific reasons that were made why SPAD was put under the PM's department, and this was done a while ago because people were not happy with public transportation in this country, and that is why a specific agency was formed and it was put under the PM's department. So again, that was a reform in response to public dissatisfaction with the state of public transport. Now, SPAD only controls land transport. We have air, we have maritime and other transportations as well. Now, when we talk about parliamentary reform, I think reform has been ongoing. If you see the select committees that have been formed, 5 that have been mentioned by Liew Tong himself, and also if you look at the PAC and the rather how do I put it, the aggressive role that or the aggressive stance they have taken on issues, I welcome that. I think it's important. The government must be subjected to a degree of accountability. So when I meant reforms are ongoing, I think reforms happen all the time, and I don't think reforms must be viewed in a vacuum. They must be viewed as a part of government and a part of governance. Yeah, that's my view on it. Thank you.
For Mr. Ivan and another question for all of the speakers here. First of all, Mr. Ivan, thank you very much for coming here and playing devil's advocate. It can be a tricky position, but we here appreciate your views and your voice. Earlier on in your speech, you made a statement, and I'm going to paraphrase here a little bit, that dissatisfaction with the electoral system funnels into Parliament and, quote, clouds the system. Could you explain exactly how this would, could you specify and clarify what you mean by clouding the system and how exactly electoral dissatisfaction funnels into Parliament? And the next question goes to all 3 of the speakers. In all of your speeches, you made comparisons with the Malaysian Parliament to the parliaments of Australia and the United Kingdom. Do you believe that either in the sense of they're doing this and we're not and we should be doing this, or they are doing this and we are, so it's okay if we're doing this? So do you believe that the parliaments of Australia, the United Kingdom and India, for example, do you believe that these are ideal parliaments that we should work towards? Thank you.
I kind of expected I'll get most of the questions. Maybe more BN guys should come up and speak. I think the big problem is that, yeah, so that's my view. Now, what I meant by that is very simple. You had an election, and then a couple of days after elections, some people claimed the election was stolen. There were 30,000 Bangladeshis. I actually had a very intelligent guy who came up to me and says, hey, you know what, you guys dropped ballot boxes from a helicopter. I'm like, wow, seriously? If we are that good, then we would have won all the seats in Parliament. So, and because of the high emotions on both sides of the political divide, then you had MPs coming to Parliament, and that frustration with losing, I guess, hindered the business, because then you cannot come back and be cooperative. But if you look at Australia, for example, I was actually there when the last election happened. Australia is a very unique system. They have elections every 3 years, yeah. And even though it was a very fierce and very personal battle between Tony Abbott and Kevin Rudd, he lost, he left. But the Labour actually came into Parliament and they start working with the government, and there is constructive debate. But what my comment was actually on the fact that, you know, you don't like it, you walk off, you dress a certain way to antagonize quite unnecessarily. But if it's criticism on a valid issue, I think we take that with an open heart. No offense taken. And I'm not offended by anything both of the speakers have said today, because that is their right to say how they see things. It is also my right to defend the government I'm part of, and also my right to speak my mind. You don't agree with me, that's perfectly fine. This is democracy in work here today. And on the Australian, UK, and Indian examples, I think there are some good things we can learn from them, and I'm sure there are some good things they can learn from us as well.
Okay, about whether we Australian system, Parliament in there, England, I think we can follow anyone, or we don't have to follow anyone. It's not a question of following. It's just like if you've never built a car before, when you build a car, you try and see whether it works, whether it's as good as the Japanese, whether it's as good as the German, you know. And the same thing with Parliament. You know, you have Parliament, you have an institution that is new to you, so you have a system. So you try and follow that what works better. So it doesn't matter which country, you know. Yeah, we don't have to follow, but it's good that when it works somewhere, if it works well in Australia, for example, or if it works well in some respect in England, we follow. You know, no worry about it. The problem is the denial, which is the problem in this country. You know, we don't produce good cars, but we say it's a great car. That's a denial. You know, and denial is a real problem after many years. You know. So it's a denial that we have democracy, it's a denial we have a free press, it's a denial we have... It's a denial. That's why we're going this way. That's why we are paying $3.60 per ringgit for US dollar. You know, because we are in denial. And I'm not here to criticize unfairly BN or BAP or... I don't, you know, to me it doesn't matter which one comes to power. I just want good leaders and good systems. Thank you.
I think you will agree with me that Zaid Ibrahim should be a current politician and not an ex-politician. I just want to go back to the questions about SPUT. I wouldn't say that there was specific reason why SPUT was formed. Before SPUT, the Transport Ministry has no control over public transport anyway. It was under the Entrepreneur Ministry because it was under the Commercial Vehicle Licensing Board. And the purpose was to, buses as well. Buses were under Commercial Vehicle Licensing Board because it was seen as a place where you can distribute favors. And this is where we fail our Malaysians. I'm very passionate about transport because when I was a kid, I thought I can fix the buses. But eventually I found out that, and therefore I wanted to be transport minister. But as I grew up, I realized that the transport minister has no control over the buses. Whether British Parliament or India Parliament or the Australian Parliament are best references, I think they offer some good examples, but we have to innovate. Our own institution has to be one that is evolving, that is innovating. I mentioned about the second room, or Westminster Hall, or main committee room. It was actually invented in the Australian Parliament and exported back to the Westminster Hall, exported back to Britain. The Australian MPs are full-timer now. They are not allowed to have a second job. Okay? The Australian Parliament required all their MPs to be full-time politicians. The British Parliament is still on a part-time basis. Okay? You can choose to be a full-timer or not to be a full-timer. I mean, these are innovations that happen in the Australian Parliament. I know both Parliament quite well. I've visited them, I studied in Canberra. And I would think that if you ask me, the Australian Parliament is more prepared to innovate than the British Parliament. And I think whichever Parliament, it doesn't matter. But we have to be an evolving institution, we have to be one that innovates. On the question of whether the Malaysian government takes an open heart to accept views and all this, and no other country put your opposition leader in jail, huh?
Just a quick comment. I'd like to disagree with Datuk Zaid. I think my Proton Persona is a great car.
Moderator, I have a question for YB. The question is, he's mentioned in his speech, in his introduction, he also showed us the difference between the PM's department budget and the money that goes into Parliament. But then that budget was presented to Dewan Rakyat, which is the Parliament, and as I understand, you are in the Parliament, and your party is in the Parliament. So my question is then, if the party is against it, and if YB thinks like this is horrible, that the Parliament is being mistreated, why doesn't Dewan Rakyat produce those budgets that they want to present? And then it goes back to this other theory that there's this idea in the country that the elections were rigged in 2013. And if they were rigged, why is the opposition still in the Parliament, and why is it not on the streets trying to make sure that the future elections do not produce similar results that undermine democracy?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, on the first question, we oppose to every budget because we think that it could be done better, and we offer our suggestions. We voted against it, but your vote is registered, and that's all. You will not be taken seriously because it's a majority rule in our Parliament without taking considerations of opposition's view. On the question of whether we should go on the street every day to call for reform, we tried. Coming Friday, we are doing one again. But whether that is the only way, I think we think we still have to stay in Parliament. However, the Parliament is not democratic. We have to be there to fight for its reform. And of course, parliamentary road is not the only avenue. We still protest.
You would still try the avenue of the Parliament. But if you believe that the Parliament is not democratic, then I think holding a seat there would then assume that you acknowledge its credibility. So if the party does it, so I think the question is this: what is the stance on the current government? What is the stance on the Parliament? Is it elected? Is it elected by the people of Malaysia, or is it a rubber stamp Parliament?
If it's a rubber stamp Parliament, we are part of the rubber stamping the government decision. I mean, I have no qualm about that. But to call for the opposition to pull out entirely from the electoral process and work outside the electoral process, I don't agree with that. I think we should be part of it in order to change. And of course, now there's a great opportunity in the sense that BN is breaking up, and the opposition, who knows, Ibrahim can come in. One final question.
Okay, just to make a few pointers. One, just now we mentioned about the whip is making sure the party toes the line. Actually, it's wrong. It's supposed to toe the coalition line because Barisan Nasional is a coalition of political parties. If we really follow the party line, I'm pretty sure Gerakan would have a different way of expressing how they view about Prevention of Terrorism Act. So that's number one. Number two, we have to recognize that Malaysia is a coalition system where there's one big coalition of Barisan Nasional consisting of 13 political parties and Pakatan Raya consisting of three big political parties. So my question now is addressed to the speakers: is that do you really think that the Westminster system that divides like into this side versus this side really works? Because we have to, I mean, there's another way to look at it, is to look at the Indonesian government where coalitions happen every 4 to 5 years whenever there's an election. It doesn't have a permanent coalition structure. It only forms when there's needed to form a coalition government. That way, I think parties like Gerakan could have their own better principled say in this, and so it's DAP, they won't feel like they have to compromise with PAS and all that, you know. So I just want to know, like, how much do you really put and commit into the Westminster system, and are you going to think about a different system altogether?
Thank you very much.
I'll answer that. It's not possible. It's not possible. Because if you have a judicial system, then we have to do away with our rulers. And that's not possible. Right? So either you have the British way. Of course, they have one queen, we have 9, but that's the system. If you think there is another way, forget it. There's no other way. What's your other question? Whether it's best for the country? Or the whip? Oh yeah, this country is very good at putting together groups of people, and that's how they share the spoils, you see. Yes, the more, the merrier, you know. That's mine, that's yours, you know. That's mine, that's yours. But this has to change, as I said, you know, and I think the more, it has to change in the sense that you can have coalition, you must have, I mean, in the modern, you know, country like Malaysia with different kinds of people, of course. But the coalition must be the coalition of common interests. It must be a coalition of common ideas for the country. It must be a coalition of what's good for the people. If it is a coalition on the basis of, well, I have 2 ministers, you take 5, you know, that's not good. That's not good. If it's a coalition about, oh, I take care of this ministry, but you take care of that, that's not good. The coalition of ideas, the coalition of what's good for the country, that we can have, and that we must have. But I think beyond that, I don't think it is good. And therefore, I'd like to see some reconfiguration of the coalition in the country, you know, some changes, you know. But I don't know whether it will happen. It will only happen if you are serious about things.
Okay, I'd like to address this both from a political point of view and also from an academic point of view. First, I wrote an article last week called "The Malay Leadership Vacuum." I argue that if Datuk Sri Najib stays on as UMNO president and if Datuk Sri Hadi stays on as past president, there will be a huge vacuum in Malay leadership, and therefore there will be new forces and there will be realignment. So just to reply to you, from an academic point of view, I think if you look at UK, in the last 5 years, it was actually under a coalition government. For the first time in 100 years, about 100 years, there was a big coalition government for 5 years, and they are looking for probably there will be another another form of coalition government, whether Labour with the Scottish Party or Conservative with UKIP. So I think the Westminster system is also an evolving one, and they have to deal with coalition politics now, and coalition politics is not new. Now I hope to see a democratic parliament where people at the cross bench, when we say cross bench means you are neither here nor there, but you have a role to play as the third party, and I do hope that our system will also give room to the cross bench where they have a role to play, but that can only happen when the opposition is the official opposition is treated fairly. Then you can treat the non-official opposition. Our trouble is that you don't treat your number one opposition fairly, not to mention other type of opposition. And therefore, I think we need to democratize our parliament. Thank you.
I think on the issue of the whip, I apologize because unlike Pakatan Rakyat, Barisan Nasional is actually a registered coalition, so sometimes we say party. But yes, we're a coalition of 13 parties. Within that, we have Barisan Nasional, which is also registered. That is why we contest under the Barisan Nasional banner and not our individual parties. So that is my response on the whip. I think the second part of coalition politics, I think it is a reality here to stay, given our diversity. And the makeup of Pakatan Rakyat is very much similar. It's a theocratic Islamic party. On one hand, PKR, which is primarily Malay, but you have a very large number of Indians and Chinese, and DAP, which is primarily a Chinese party, with also a minority of Malay and Indians. If you look on the Barisan Nasional side, it's a similar structure. So both coalitions, I think, have a similar structure. But the only difference, one stark difference, is that in Barisan Nasional, all the 13 party presidents actually speak with one another, unlike Pakatan Rakyat, where two presidents or two chairmen don't speak. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, it gives me great pleasure to close this forum. A round of applause for our great speakers.